Shalom, everybody. Ariel Tzadok here from the KosherTorah School, found online at www.KosherTorah.com, bringing to you today's daily lesson in the Sefer Yetzirah. This is now lesson 58, and we are in the third chapter of the book in the 8th Mishnah, and we are now going to talk about the letter Mem. One of the three mothers, the male mother of the three. Very curious to have a male mother, but we need to put things into a context to understand what everything is all about, as usual. Now, in our previous Mishnah number 7, there was a section at the end there which we didn't mention, so I'm just going to reference it real quick here. When we were talking about the letter Aleph, and we were talking about the place of balance, Aleph then becomes the perspective through which we perceive all the other realities. So in this respect, when Aleph is placed first, and that when the male is placed next to the Aleph, then the male comes first. The male letter in this respect is Mem. So when I'm looking through the Aleph perspective through the male lens, I have the Aleph, and then the male, and then the female. In this case, Aleph, and then Mem, and then Shin. Needless to say, when I'm looking through the female perspective, the female comes first. And then the Aleph perspective, gazing through the female, you have the Aleph first, and then the Shin, and then the Mem. We're going to do the exact same thing here with the letter Mem. But first, let's understand the nature and context of these things. When we're using terms like male and female, maybe it's better to refer to them in their electric polarities as positive or negative. We've discussed all about this within the context of the Hesed and the Gevurah, the expansive property and the restrictive property. But also understand, if you will, the male or the higher being the invisible influencer, and the female being the visible influencee. I know, making up words, influencer, influencee, but you'll bear with me in that respect. It's to help us understand relationships. Now, I could easily throw in here the terminologies that we're familiar with from Eastern religions like yin and yang. But when you go and look at the correlations of yin and yang in the Oriental traditions and the correlations of the male and female properties within our Torah traditions, they don't always agree. Now you might say, well, that's because somebody's wrong. Oh, haven't we already covered that attitude before? Remember, if you are Chinese or Korean or Japanese or Vietnamese or Thai or whatever culture in the subdivisions of the greater Asian culture, you have that which we call perspective. Isn't that what we've been talking about? Isn't that what we refer to as the combination of the letters? Now, in a Jewish point of view, many of my peers will be very familiar with this concept. What is perspective? Well, from a Jewish point of view, when it comes to the observance of Judaism, you have Eastern European expressions, and those are subdivided between those that are Hasidic and those which are supposed to be rationalist. And amongst each of those schools, you have divisions and subdivisions and subdivisions. Amongst the Hasidim, they subdivide all the time. I think it was the exact opposite of the intent of the founding master of that school, the Baal Shem Tov, but why should students claiming to follow a master really follow him? All right, yeah, contradictory, but perspective. So, in that context, amongst, for example, the Hasidic community, the two most popular that you have today are the Breslov and the Lubavitch, and each one has a very different perspective of viewing Judaism than the other. No one's more right or wrong than the other. They're just different. Now, I just spoke within the example of one context We can talk about, for example, Sephardic Jews, those Jews from Middle East and other origins. But let's not leave those out from Spain. Let's not leave out those Spanish Jews who came from London, England, Hamburg, Germany, Amsterdam, right, in the Netherlands. They had Sephardic Jews there, of course. And everyone has a different perspective. So if you are going to look at the Jews who are of the London Sephardic community, the old Spanish Portuguese, they're very different from their brethren who are from Morocco or from Damascus or from Baghdad. Now, the reason why, again, I give you these examples is as a practical application of the concepts that we're dealing here. I know. So many of you want the Sefer Yetzirah to be a book of mystical magic, that you're going to look at letters, you're going to gaze upon these in your fantasies, and that's what they are, and all of a sudden magic is going to happen. That's what I know many of you want. I've actually had peers, friends of mine, tell me, Rabbi, why don't you put more magic in the book? To which I say, this is not magic. This is real. But some people don't like what's real. They only want what they want. Fine. Then look at things through your perspective and understand them accordingly. But the perspective of this book is what it is. And we gaze upon it, contemplate it, and understand it within its context. The place of the Aleph, we've already discussed. Now the place of the Mem. We're going to rule. Himlicha mem b'mayim. The Mem is going to rule over waters. Waters is again the symbolic metaphor of that which is flowing, that which is fluid in movement. Shin, fire, is considered to be rigid. Okay, now you can say, well, wait a second. Aleph is air, gas, water, liquid, and fire, like energy. Isn't that like the highest form? Well, yes and no. Because if you remember that the Shin, we'll get to this, is the female form. And the female form in the name Yud Ke Vav Ke, God's holy name, well, remember you got two of those letters in there. That's the female letter. First you have the Yud, which is the male, then the female. Then you have the Vav, which is our Aleph, and then the lower Hey. You don't have a lower Yud, you don't have a lower Vav, you have a lower Hey. And this is a very, very big deal that's discussed by Chaim Vital, of course, in his entire Otzar Chaim, Etz Chaim stuff, which we elaborated on in great detail. Just to be brief, the whole concept of that which we call the feminine today, and yeah, we're talking about the Mem, which is really the masculine. But okay, we'll digress for a minute. According to Reb Chaim, the original worlds were all female. According to Reb Chaim, the original act of creation was all female. But the female in this world has fallen and therefore needs to be raised up. That's why I have the lower Hey, which is supposed to rise to the level back of the upper Hey. Those are the fallen kings. Malchut, it says Malachim, but it's really Malchiot. We should call them the queens. But now, with that being decided, with that being discussed, let's go into our Mem. Mem rules over the water. We apply to it its crown, Keshelo Keter. We tzarafan ze b'ze. We again permutate them and use the Mem as our perspective to see all the things. V'tzara behem aretz be'olam. The Mem forms the earth. Kor b'shana, winter in the seasons, and beten in the body, in the stomach, the tantien area. Again, from the male point of view, the Mem comes first. What comes next? Well, you would then have your Aleph, which is your intermediary, and the Shin being last. That would be the male version, because the Mem obviously is first. But now, in the female version, with the Mem coming first, you have the Shin, and then the Aleph. So this is very important. Within nature itself, We have the materialization of these energetic fields. They're not just magnetic fields in the planet. They're actually energetic fields, which in psychology we say we experience them as archetypes. And these, in quote, archetypes are how we connect through the mind through the greater world. Now, this is something that Carl Jung pioneered. And if you remember, Carl Jung himself said in many places that he believed that the Kabbalah and the old masters of the Torah tradition predated his understanding of psychoanalysis by centuries. Another time, another story for another time. But understand now, the nature of the male. The male, we said, if you remember way back when, corresponds to the Sefer Hokhma, which is the secret of the letter Yod. Now, that's all the way up there. What does that have to do with down here? How do we apply the Mem, corresponding to the Yud, to the Dantian area? On the Sefirot, it's between Netzah and Hod. Now, Netzach and Hod are always said to be the doorway to prophecy, because through Netzach and Hod, we access Hokhma, which is the intuitive, and that is what gives us prophecy. This needs to be explained. Netzach and Hod are the applications of Tiferet. Tiferet is the Vav, and Netzach is that conquering, expansive expression of the Vav, which is the form of the natural order. The form of the natural order we call Torah, name Yud Kei Vav Kei. We want to impose that order on the world. That's Netzach. Why? Because it brings so much benefit and value and good. That's Hod. So when your perspective is for the betterment of the world, and you're feeling the inner gut heart of how you can make this world a better place, and you're looking for practical ways and means, you tap into a secret psychic energy. And that is that polarity between the Netzach and the Hod, and that's what this Mem gives us. We call that the male. Why? Don't think of it as man in the masculine, but think of it as energetic, which is water. You're trying to get into the fluidness of things. Because if you think that this world can be fixed, repaired, made better by a rigid form which applies to everyone, now you're falling into the trap of many modern politicians. One law to serve them all. One rule to guide over everyone. This is nonsense. You can't have that simply because you have all kinds of different people. And all kinds of different people need the individual expressions of their things, of their expressions in life, their perspectives, as long as they're not harming themselves or others. That's really the only parameter. Water. Fluidity. How is this to be applied? That's why we contemplate when we meditate. We contemplate the stomach area, called in the Orient the Dantian, which they say this is the source of the chi, the life force energy. They hit the nail on the head. The male power of Hokhma is sublimated. It takes over the functions of the body as we know, all right? Our heartbeat, respiration, digestion, everything going on, respiration, is not consciously controlled by the intellect. Can you imagine right now having to think, okay, I got to think about the oxygen and the air coming in, taking out the carbon dioxide going out, and then the respiration. You got a million and one things. No, the higher mind is doing that and operating the body. What from our intellectual point of view is automatic, but it is operating on its own, and it knows itself. We can call that the power of healing. You can call it your higher self. You can call it your guardian angel. It is. Deal with it. That is the male that is working behind the scenes, if you will, operating at that underground secret level, which is, if you will, cloaked within the intellect. So the intellect is on the outside, the intuition's on the inside. The intellect is on the outside, intuition on the in. Female on the out, male on the in. You can say, wait a second, that's not the way it's supposed to be. The male, he rules. He's the one in charge. The woman should stay at home, barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. The man goes out, right? No, sorry, that's not right. not by anything biblical. Oh, where does it say that in the Bible? How about the famous Proverbs chapter 31, the famous woman of valor? Now again, we're going back and forth from female to male, male and female role models, and where does this all fit into Sefer Yetzirah? And the answer is obvious, I hope, that we're putting into practice the underlying concepts of the book. Because what good is theory without practice? If you don't see how it applies, then what are you wasting your time with? Male is the subtle, the seductive. It is that which is beneath the surface. It creates the land. And even in the Kabbalah, it says Abba, Bara, Batra. In Kabbalah, as you know, Hokhma is called Abba, Father, the Yud. Bina is called Ima, Mother. Vav, Tiferet, is called Zerampin, is also called Son. The Son of God? No, not in any Christian context. Sorry, guys, because Hey, Malchut is called daughter. So if you want to say God has a son, and God has a wife, and God has a daughter, now that might sound rather LDS to some of you, know what I'm talking about, but whatever. Remember, we're dealing with symbolisms, not realities. So the Mem. We contemplate the Dantien. We try to tap into the inner working of our own anatomical nature, based upon the verse that the book of Job says, "Me basari haza Eloha," from my flesh I can contemplate God. And this is why in meditation, you'll see many times they'll meditate with the head facing towards the Dantien. Now in Kabbalah, this is the mochin of the brain, focusing down to the Tiferet, heart, and the Yesod. Well, you're not looking at the Yesod, but you're looking right in between, belly button area. That's that place between Tiferet and Yesod. Remember, the center column going up and down, and then, of course, like this. So that place where they meet, that's your Dantien, and that is the place of the Mem, the Netzah, and the Hod. And I can feel it vibrate within me. But as I am a male. And my perspective is male. Dramatic pause for you, but didn't we talk about what Jung called the anima and the animus, the inner female and the inner male that we each have respectively? Well, there you go. The Mem has within it the inner female, the Shin. And the female, as we will see when we get down to the Shin, has within it its inner male. So the Mem always has its inner female, but it doesn't come directly. It has to go through the intermediary of the Aleph. But not always. Sometimes you can have the Mem and deal directly with the female, with the Aleph behind. This is the Mem Aleph Shin, the Mem Shin Aleph. What's the real difference between them? How is it that I can have the male principle, and sometimes I have the state of balance, and then the female, creating polarity, or sometimes I have the male with the female with the balance on the other side? Think about it. If you have like a scale like this, okay? This is the male side, this is the female side. How are they balanced? They're balanced when things are in the middle. So when Aleph is in the middle, it can balance it out. But how about if I took this scale and I reversed it like this? And that's now the Aleph of the scale, and here's the Mem, and there's the Shin. All right? Male, female, as opposed to male, female like this. And you can say, what does that mean? Well, that's a great thought for you to consider, because I've ran out of time in our little lesson here today. And it's not for me to give you all the answers anyway. Remember, things have to flow like water. So you are the one who has to think about what that means. And Be'ezrat Hashem, when we pick up in our class tomorrow, maybe we'll contemplate more about the nature of how you can sense the difference in the flavor and the feeling of a Mem which goes first to Aleph before the Shin, and then to a Shin before the Aleph. It has to do with the coldness of the time in the land. And that again corresponds to the belly and to the land itself. Pick up on that in our next class. I'm Ariel Tzadok of Kosher Torah School. I'll see you in our next class. Shalom.